Now, most listeners to this podcast will know about the likes of Andy Burnham in Greater Manchester, Ben Houchin on Teesside, and Tracy Brabin in West Yorkshire, elected Metro mayors with powers over transport, regeneration and skills, who are becoming the faces of their different northern regions and attempting to put themselves at the sharp end of the levelling up agenda. Next summer, we can add to their ranks a Metro mayor for the north east of England, an area which stretches from the location of Dominic Cummings' famous eye test in Barnard Castle, County Durham, right up to the Scottish border. The best part of 2 million people live in the area covered by the North East devolution deal, finally agreed this year after years of wrangling between local leaders. And it's a diverse region with huge potential thanks to its industrial heritage and natural assets, but also huge challenges. Strikingly, it's the only part of the country where child poverty is actually getting worse rather than better. So who is going to be the first elected mayor of that region? Most observers think the strong favourite is Kim McGuinness, currently the Northumbria Police and Crime Commissioner and one of two politicians trying to be Labour's candidate in next year's election. In recent weeks, there's been a lot of coverage of the fact that her main rival, Jamie Driscoll, or someone who might have been her main rival, the mayor for the smaller North of Tyne area, has been kept off the Labour shortlist by party bosses. But I really wanted to find out more about Kim and her vision for the North East if she does get the backing of voters. So, Kim McGuinness, welcome to the Northern Agenda podcast.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem at all. So, just as a starting point, I said in my intro, you're considered the favourite to be the next mayor. I mean, would you agree with that assertion that you're the favourite?
Well, I mean, I hope so. I really do hope so. I think I've got a really strong and positive vision for the region, and it is the region that I love. I'm from here. I really care about it, and that's my main motivation. And I think we can see very clearly in the polls at the moment, Labour are doing very well, which is great news for people like me who want us to be in power making decisions. And so I hope that is the case. But you never rest on your laurels. And for me, it's all about hard work, about listening to residents, and about making sure that the vision that I present resonates with them.
Now, just to give people an idea of what you're all about, if they're not so familiar with politics in the North East, you've been an elected politician for less than a decade. You became a councillor in 2015, and before that, you worked in sectors like finance, charities, and universities. I mean, how would you describe your political sort of philosophy, your sort of political viewpoint, and what got you into politics in the first place?
Well, I suppose my political philosophy is just that I am straightforward, out and out Labour. I believe that we should be seeking social justice. I believe that we should be making things better for people in our region. I believe that it's all about representing the people that live here, and ultimately, as I said at the beginning, that is my main motivation. I was never a person who set out ever to be a politician. I didn't sit at university thinking about entering into my first election. It was something that actually probably took me by surprise more than anybody else. And I'd been doing all right. I'd worked, as he said, in various different sectors. And when I was first elected, I was working in students' unions, quite senior jobs in charities, really supporting students and young people with a real interest in things like their mental health and equality, making sure that young people from a diverse set of backgrounds got a good education. And then I'd moved back to the Northeast not long before, and kind of got involved because at the time I thought that the coalition government was terrible, and I wanted to get a Labour government in 2015. This is about 2013, and essentially I was asked to stand. Somebody said to me, look, you should stand for the council. And I said, I don't know, I couldn't really do that. I don't think that I'm ready to do that. I don't think I've got the experience. And as quite a lot of these stories go, eventually they said to me, look, we really need women like you to stand for the council. And that's kind of what led me to my first election. And I just love representing people.
Now, obviously, you were a councillor for 4 years, and then since 2019, you've been Police and Crime Commissioner, which means you oversee Northumbria Police. You help set the budget and its strategic priorities. You hold the Chief Constable to account. Now, it seemed to me, as a journalist, sort of observing politics in the north, that in recent times you've been quite keen to talk not just about crime and policing, but other issues as well. So things like the cost of living crisis, poverty, transport, culture, and the arts. So, has it been on your radar for a while that you wanted to take on a bigger, broader job than just crime and policing, or is it just this is an opportunity that's presented itself and you've only thought that you wanted to do it quite recently?
No, I think I have to be honest and say it is something that I've been thinking about, but that's not why I've been talking about those things. I think it's really clear to me that it's all connected. And I want this place that I love and that I live in and that I'm a resident in to be as safe as possible. I want the people that I represent to feel safe. And this is a really safe region, actually. But we, as you mentioned in your introduction, we do have really persistent high levels of child poverty. One of the things that parents talk to me quite a lot about is the fact that they worry about how that makes young people vulnerable to getting involved in crime or to becoming victims of crime. We know that there's a real link between deprivation and crime, and my police and crime plan is called Fighting Poverty, Fighting Crime for that very reason. And I really think that if we look at what the real true causes of crime are, we tackle those inequalities, we support people improve their lives, we will ultimately reduce crime. And I think that that's really proven. So yes, I'll be honest and say it's been on my mind for some time as the devolution journey has happened in the region, that it might be something that I'd like to do. You know, as I said, I really love this place and I love representing it. But my driver as a police and crime commissioner has really been prevention, prevention, prevention. And ultimately, that's what all that's about.
So, am I right in thinking that if you were to become mayor, because of the way that the boundaries work in the northeast, there would still be a police and crime commissioner for Northumbria. There would still be one for Durham. So you wouldn't be, as some places have, amalgamating the police and crime commissioner's office into your own mayoralty if you were to become elected, or is it more complicated than that?
No, you're absolutely right. So with the new elected mayor will cover 7 local authorities, including Durham. And in that area, there's 2 police and crime commissioners. So Northumbria, which is the 6 local authorities north of Durham, and up to the borders. And then there's Durham police and crime commissioner, which has, by a kind of quirk of boundaries, also Darlington, which is in the Tees Valley mayoralty. So it's kind of the patchwork of the way that these patches are divided up. And we will have still 2 police and crime commissioners in our region, and then a mayor.
That's interesting. And so, I mean, how do you feel if you were to move from overseeing the police to overseeing, the region as a whole? How do you feel you've left sort of crime and policing in Northumberland? Because I know it is a well performing force, like certainly better performing than the likes of Cleveland or places like that. But I know that there are areas in which crime is on the increase in your part of the world. Do you feel like the force is doing well or has been doing well under your supervision?
Yeah, I feel like the force has been is I feel like the force is much improved, and you can see that in our HMIC, which is sort of like the Ofsted for police forces. Everybody knows about Ofsted, less people know about HMIC, but we've gone from requires improvement to good in the time that I've been elected, which I'm really, really proud of. We've seen real improvements in things like response rates, answering the telephone. We've seen a real shift change in the way that the force positions itself around prevention, and not just being reactive all the time. And I think that's really positive. But you and I have talked about this before. It would be remiss of me not to talk about how difficult things are in policing. We have had very, very significant budget cuts yet again. Austerity has not ended in public services whatsoever, and that really shows in policing. And when the government have talked about their 20,000 new police officers, which we all know are actually replacement police officers, in this region, we're still 500 short of where we were in 2010. So there is still an awful lot to do, but I'm very proud of where we've got to. And I think the real key thing for me is that prevention role doesn't start and end with the oversight of policing. I take that very seriously. I really enjoy doing the job that I'm in now. It starts and ends with looking at the whole big picture. And despite the fact that a mayor won't oversee that, I think it'll be really important that a mayor works together with police and crime commissioners, Labour, I hope, in order to make sure that we're tackling all of the different things that cause crime and that safety is still a really big part of the agenda.
Now, we mentioned child poverty already, and one eye-catching, at least to me, pledge that you've made, a sort of key part of your manifesto, is that you want to end child poverty in the North East, which is an ambitious target, I would say, and is obviously an aim everyone would endorse when the region has the highest rates in the country. But you've also said, I think, that the devolution deal for the North East doesn't go far enough, isn't radical enough to change the lives of people in the region. So is it actually the case that if you become mayor, you yourself won't have the powers to achieve this aim of ending poverty? Because actually it's something that is really in the gift of central government to solve, and you don't have the levers to pull really as a metro mayor to make much difference.
Look, I think that we've got no choice but for that to be our aim as a region. Where we've got to now, with levels of child poverty that are up and around 40%, it is absolutely abominable. It is a disgrace. And it's something that we've got to take responsibility for. And you don't set out and think about, presenting a manifesto to the public and saying, oh, well, I'm going to halve that, and I'm still going to leave 20% of kids in child poverty. We've got to have the fundamental aim of ending it. And I don't think that the two things are mutually exclusive. I'm happy to talk about sort of my views on wider devolution, but some of that will be delivered with hard and fast initiatives. We've got to improve, for example, the public transport system. We've got to bring it back into public control, make it easier for people to get around the region, make it easier for them to take up employment and education and skills. We've got to have a skills offer, which we've got to have my cat's trying to get in on the conversation. We've got to have a skills offer that really reflects what we need to deliver in the region in terms of delivering on house building targets, in terms of delivering on our green energy goals, in terms of building up our foundational economy. We really need to be looking at things like subsidising childcare for the people that need it the most, giving people real opportunities. And with the powers that are there, we can do an awful lot of that, along with the council leaders and the levers that they can pull as well. And then on top of that, our ability to convene across our region with businesses, with the charitable sector. I think everybody wants to do this. So that can be our aim. And together, using a combination of the hard powers that we've got and the ability to come together around a goal, I think we can really make big inroads into that. But at the same time, I'm pretty clear that this is Conservative-led devolution, like the likes of which we've seen elsewhere. There's a lot of biddable cash where you have to compete against other regions. I want to see an end to that. And I would like to see more powers devolved to our communities so that they can have a say in making decisions. And I'm talking about really practical things like the Homes England funding. I'm talking about really practical things like extending skills into post-16. I'm talking about things like Job Centre, really practical things where we can start to really improve lives, but devolving them wholesale so that we can make the decisions in the region, and we take away that kind of constant back and forth to Westminster and recognise that different parts of the country need to be allowed to do things in different ways, and our problems that we've got to solve will be really different to those of Manchester and Leeds and London and West Midlands and other areas.
So Labour members in the North East are going to start making their views known on who their candidate should be very soon. The other person they can choose from is Paul Brannan, a former MEP for the North East. But I think the big news story in terms of the selection has been the fact that Jamie Driscoll, the socialist mayor, who's already doing a very similar job, he is a metro mayor, but in the smaller North of Tyne region, he's been kept off the Labour shortlist apparently because of an appearance he made on stage with Ken Loach, the film director, who was expelled from Labour in 2021. Now, we don't know at this stage whether Jamie Driscoll will stand to be mayor, perhaps as an independent or for another party, but obviously it's done your chances of getting chosen and elected no harm at all. But do you think the selection process has been tainted in any way by keeping someone who is already an elected mayor with a mandate off the Labour shortlist?
Look, my only role in this is as a candidate, and all of those decisions are for the party to make. And I have got what I believe to be a really compelling vision. It's a positive vision for the region. And my job now is to put that to members, and then with the ultimate aim of putting it to the public and getting a Labour mayor in this region, because I think that that's the right thing to do. And that's my role in this.
But it does seem to be part of it seems, at least to me, it seems to be part of a wider trend where Labour headquarters in London is keeping seemingly popular local politicians off the shortlist to be general election candidates, say in places like Wakefield or Cumbria, often because they're seen as being in the wrong faction of the party or apparently affiliated to Jeremy Corbyn. Now, you're seen as being a sort of quite close to Keir Starmer. I mean, what do you say to those who suggest that his office, the leader's office, is keeping too tight a grip on the process for selecting candidates and not allowing local members to have their say, as seems to be the case in the North East?
Well, local members will have their say, and for somebody like me, I have only got one role in this, as I said, which is as a candidate, and I'm happy to stand against. I was happy to stand against whoever put themselves forward, and I've got a compelling vision to present. But my concern is the North East. It's about getting the right outcomes for the North East, making sure that we get a Labour mayor, and then actually also making sure that we get a Labour government, because all of that stuff that I've said about devolution and what we really want, Labour are talking about that. We're talking about having more devolved power into our regions. And so it's going to be really important for us to get Keir Starmer into number 10, to get a Labour front bench that we can work with to get more power into our regions so that we can make our own decision and we can ultimately solve those problems, fight child poverty and make this place known as being the home of real opportunity.
So you think you would have? Do you think you would have beaten Jamie Driscoll if he was on the shortlist?
I'm very clear that I was putting myself forward as a candidate, regardless of who was on the shortlist, and it was always my plan to win.
Okay, I'll stop asking about Jamie Driscoll now, and I'll go back to your manifesto.
I know why you want to ask, but my role is honestly just as a candidate, and I believe got the right vision for our region.
I understand. Now, one of the interesting facets of that vision, and an interesting line I saw in your manifesto, is that the North East cannot continue in second place or worse to Manchester, Leeds, or London, which is an interesting way of putting it, I guess. I mean, why do you think these other northern areas are seemingly ahead of the North East, and how do you go about catching up with them?
Well, they've had devolution for longer. They've had a lot of these powers in place that we're looking to bring to our region, including things like control over transport. But it's also about that really, really strong voice. And as I've said over and over again, I sound a bit like a broken record. You know, the reason that I do this, I just think this is the best place in the world. You know, and it's almost something that we laugh at in our house. You know, my husband says we go on holiday and you spend a week trying to get people to come to the Northeast, and it's so true, because I just think it's the best place in the world, and I want to be out there as a mayor singing our praises, talking up our strong points, attracting investment, attracting people to come and visit and be tourists and spend money in our economy, making sure at the same time that we're focusing on giving people the opportunities that they need to thrive and succeed. And other areas of the country have had those powers and that capability for a long while now, and have got really good Labour representatives doing that. And I don't want us in second place. I want us to have the same powers. I want us to have the ability to go out and sing the praises of our region and to bring all of that here. Because what this is ultimately about is handing our communities more control over their own destiny. We are until you get into Scotland, which is a different country. We're the furthest away from London. We're the furthest away from Westminster. And so having all of the policies set in that little bubble is never going to work for us. It needs to be brought closer to home.
Now, one of the you mentioned, getting tourists into the northeast and encouraging people to come to the region. I know that one policy you've set out, which is already in action in another part of the north, is a so-called tourist tax, so a levy, as an extra amount of money that is put onto hotel bills for people who come to the region from elsewhere. And I think the idea is that the money is spent on improving the cultural offer that your region has, to in turn make it more attractive for other tourists to come. But I guess the concern people will always have is an extra tax is potentially off-putting to visitors, particularly with the cost of living crisis that we're going through, putting more of a burden on people. I mean, I'm guessing from your point of view, the downsides of doing this are outweighed by the advantages.
I think this is a totally normal thing. Most of us will have been to major European cities or other places around the world, and it's just there, and it's something that you don't even think about and you don't even notice because it's such a small amount of money to the visitor. But to us, it's massive. What it could raise is massive, and what we could spend it on is, I think, really game changing in terms of making sure that it benefits the people that live here, it benefits the businesses that operate in our area. It grows, we use it to be able to bring major events and to have festivals and to improve our culture and creative offer, to make it an even more attractive place to come to. But I think what's also really important to me about this is it's not just about that. It's not just about the bright, shiny things. It's also about investing that into our communities, into models that allow young people better access to culture and creative options and opportunities in education. Because I think that over the last years of austerity, far too much of that's fallen away. And that's got to be part of this plan to reduce child poverty in the region. And it's got to be part of the plan to upskill people that live here and grow our economy as well. These are real potential economic assets that we need to be making the most of. So I actually think it's a pretty uncontroversial plan as far as what goes on nationally, and it's a bit of a no-brainer. It's something that I want us to be doing hand in hand with businesses, with hotels, with people in the first instance. But I also think it's something that makes sense as a statutory power in the long run.
Now, my last question, at the risk of sounding like a job interview, let's fast forward to next summer. If you're elected as the first Northeast Mayor, what's the first thing you're going to do on the day you're elected? Because I guess that's symbolically, that's a sort of important thing, isn't it? Where's your attention going first?
Well, one of the things that I've said absolutely upfront is that we will get to work very urgently on bringing buses back into public control. And do you know what? It's not the sexiest thing in the manifesto, but it's probably one of the things that makes the most difference to the most people. The more people use buses than any other type of public transport put together, and we're the region that's faced the biggest cuts to our bus services. And so in order to deliver that as quickly as possible, we've got to get to work day one in starting that. And I've got to be honest, it will be a process, but it's got to be, day one, marker in the sand. This is what we're going to do, as well as looking at how we kick off this plan to really tackle child poverty in the region.
Kim McGuinness, I can see your cat just poking its head onto the video screen. It's clearly very keen to come and join the interview, but you managed to keep it away, restrain it very, very nicely. So well done, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.